Welcome, everyone. Welcome the prospective students and those who are thinking about applying to BITS Law School. We'll talk about a couple of key skills here. I hope all of you know what the topic of this session is going to be. Um, this is where I'll be discussing some of the key skills that you will require in a law school. Since all of you are interested in pursuing a law degree, perhaps have already been admitted to the law school, or are thinking about a career in law school. So this is going to be an orientation session on what can you expect in a law school, what are some skills or traits that a successful law student or a lawyer should possess, and how can you go about achieving or attaining and refining those skills. So primarily today, I'll be talking about six major skills. All right, so these are the six important characteristics, traits, perhaps you can call them, or attitude that you can start embodying right now, even at this point, to make sure that you really stand out in your legal career, in your profession, or even in your journey at a law school. Um, so Anurag says there is no voice. Are all of you able to hear me? Is there any problem?
Yes, Chan, we are able to hear.
Okay, okay, great. Perhaps Anurag, it's the problem at your end. If you could try to kind of work it out, maybe try and rejoin. Maybe that could work. Um, so as I said, I'll be talking about these six major skills, but I would also be glad, of course, to take any questions that you may have. In fact, I would rather encourage that because that will also help me orient my session better. And I'd be able to address any specific questions that you guys have, and to be able to discuss them better, elaborating on the experiences um, of the BITS Law School, perhaps that you guys might be interested in. But that's the agenda for this session. So I'll be talking about roughly 35 to 40 minutes, maybe. And then perhaps we can keep it open for questions and answers. But even in the meanwhile, as I'm speaking, if you come across any doubt, if you have any question, please feel free to type it in, and Kevin and Runalili here will redirect those questions to me, and I'll be more than happy to address those questions. All right. Now, um, let me first of all maybe go through the list of all these six skills that I plan on discussing. Now, there are also subcomponents to these skills, but the list of these six skills that I have in front of me is first of all curiosity, and I would say commercial awareness. Second is analytical and critical thinking. Third is research. Fourth is communication skill. Fifth is interpersonal skills. And sixth is overall management and organization. All right. So I'll explain each of these skills one by one, so you don't really have to worry. And I'll revise it again at the end. But let's go through each of these skills one by one. Now, one of the first skills I've mentioned is curiosity and general awareness, or specifically perhaps commercial awareness. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, the first thing that you'll realize after joining a law school or perhaps joining a bar is law is incredibly vast. In a law school, we are only able to perhaps cover, some part of it, but no lawyer or no law school will be able to give you an understanding of each and every dimension of all possible laws out there. And perhaps law is also very dynamic, so it keeps on evolving, it keeps on dealing with new ideas. Perhaps you guys have heard about so many technological advancements that are happening, be it artificial intelligence, or be it blockchain, be it the new concerns regarding deep fake technology. And it's never really possible in a law school to cover all of these dimensions. We do try to keep it dynamic. So we will have multiple elective courses that touch upon these different aspects. But what you require to excel in this career is self initiative or curiosity on your part, right? What do I mean by that? This is this constant urge to learn something new, to keep on learning. I remember I was listening to Mr. Fali Nariman, and perhaps all of you are aware of, uh, who Mr. Nariman was, who he passed away recently. and an incredibly encyclopedic mind, and a very senior lawyer at Mumbai Bar first of all, and then eventually practicing at the Supreme Court. And he often used to say, even at the age of 90 or 92, he would say, "I'm a student of law." Even at that age, even after having spent around 6 to 7 decades practicing, um, he would still go there with a curious and open mindedness, always be willing to learn something new. And that's the attitude one needs to embody. And this curiosity can reflect in multiple ways. Um, it's perhaps you reading through important, developments in law every day. Just a simple fact of, reading important cases, perhaps. There are some excellent resources out there. Perhaps you've heard about Live Law, or Bar and Bench. There are these very good websites out there who regularly post updates on important, legislations, important cases. They also have everyday digest, perhaps, that you can subscribe to and you get over emails. So it could be a simple thing as browsing through a relevant website. It could be reading an editorial in a newspaper. Perhaps it's about a new legislation and different dimensions of it. Perhaps it's about new technology and how it affects the legal landscape. Or it could be about reading commercial newspapers, right? It could be, simply browsing through every day 3 news articles from, let's say, Financial Times or Economic Times or the Mint newspaper. Perhaps it's a transaction of, mergers and acquisition. Perhaps Walmart is taking over Flipkart. Perhaps a foreign entity is trying to invest in some Indian venture. So being aware of all of these dimensions, being curious about these developments, being curious about what are some new dynamic developments, being curious about legal developments, being curious about laws, being curious about case law, right? This is the process of constant learning, right? And self growth. And it is a never ending process, really. But that's the fun part. Law is always going to be dynamic. And if you also remain dynamic in your approach, I think there's never a dull moment. Something keeps on happening, right? New developments, new laws, new case law, completely new areas of law. So, for instance, we are, there is a trend right now that that's shifting. Our attitude towards litigation is moving from, this adversarial notion to a more conciliatory mechanism such as mediation and arbitration, right? And we do have a specialized kind of elective setup for that. But that's a new development, and it's completely going to change the dynamic of our legal profession, right? And that's something that we have to keep on learning about, keeping ourselves updated about, or think about these new criminal law bills. Perhaps you've heard about, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, Bharatiya Saksha Sanhita, which replaced our IPC and CRPC and Indian Evidence Act. And that's a new development. There are some provisions which are completely new, some provisions which are revised from the earlier law. And that means that there's going to be a new development, new jurisprudence, as we refer to it, right? New cases, new interpretations. And if you really want to be at the top of your game, what distinguishes these great lawyers from ordinary ones is really being up to date. Mr. Nariman often used to talk about these doyens of, bars at Mumbai High Court, for instance, people such as Jamshedji Kanga, or lawyers such as Daftari, and how they used to be aware of cases, which are very new, or perhaps cases that have been overruled, and that would be their trump card, right? So fundamentally, it's about being curious, keeping an open mind, never assuming that you've explored and exhausted all law, but always taking this uh, humble attitude towards this vast field of law, and always understanding that you will be a student of law for your lifetime, right? Perhaps a more informed student, but we are all going to be students of law throughout our lives. And if you keep this attitude, then I think you will constantly focus on self growth and self development. And eventually, the dividend will come, right? That will help you stand out, and that will help you have an edge over perhaps your peers. So that's something that you can keep in mind. So the crux of it is, and what can you do every day? Let's say going forward, I would suggest at least browse through websites such as Live Law or Bar and Bench. Make it a habit. Note down these names: Live Law, Bar and Bench, or if you're interested in a corporate law career, or generally also, I would suggest just browsing through, the editorial page of the Indian Express, perhaps, or newspapers which are devoted to commercial aspects such as the Mint or Economic Times. Um, or if you listen to podcasts, then there are some excellent podcasts out there. One by The Economist, for instance, is really brilliant. So note down these names and make it a habit. Integrate the idea of reading something every day, learning something new every day, and perhaps listening to something new every day, right? So that's the first thing. If you want me to repeat the names of these websites or podcasts, please do that. I can maybe cover it at the end also, but that's something that you have to keep in mind. So that's the first skill, right? Curiosity and commercial awareness or general awareness. Now, the second skill. The second skill is what I refer to broadly as the ability to zoom in and zoom out. Now, what do I mean by it? It's not very abstract, it's very simple. For a lawyer, it's important to have both analytical thinking and critical thinking. All right. Now, by analytical thinking, it's the ability to zoom in, it's the ability to go into the details. That's what matters. That's what, again, kind of, makes you stand apart, because your ability to uh, dissect things. I'll give an example later. And the second skill is the ability to take a step back, to look at the issue holistically, and also to perhaps come up with a creative solution, a new interpretation, right? A new perspective on a legal issue. And both these skills are equally important, right? Your ability to actually kind of zoom in and go into the details, but also the ability to take a step back and look at the entire picture and then think about the entire issue. So one is perhaps broadly referred to as the analytical thinking, and the other is referred to as critical thinking, right? Now, let's take an example of each of these skills. Now, let's suppose, there is a client who comes to you, or in a law school, let's say there is an exam, and in our exams, we often have what we refer to as hypothetical questions. So what we do is we often, we don't, in our law question papers, we don't give you these answers which, are simply can be attempted by, relying on your memory. No, it involves some part of application. We give you fact situation. Perhaps you guys have heard about moot courts, right? These are these hypothetical facts that are given, and you have to apply your mind. You have to apply the law to the fact situation, identify the issue, and then come to your conclusion. So even in your examinations, it's something similar. Of course, it's at smaller scale because you have to attempt it in a limited time. But analytical thinking is very useful here. When you come across a set of circumstances or facts, your first reaction should be to dissect those set of facts, right? And to understand what is relevant, what is irrelevant, looking at the law, trying to understand which law is going to be relevant, what are the legal issues that are coming out of these fact situations, what laws and case law, right? What legislations and different court interpretations are applicable here. And then how can I perhaps think about possible solutions to this? And this is what I refer to as skill of zooming in and unpacking something to understand different dimensions of it. In fact, in law schools, we teach you these skills. So in your very first semester, for instance, in legal methods or even in torts, you'll study about the IRAC method. Don't worry about, being trying to understand the entire method, but just to give you a brief idea, the IRAC method is basically IRAC. You have to identify an issue out of the fact situation in front of you. Think of you as a lawyer, right? And a client comes to you. Now, what do you ask them first? You ask them the entire set of facts and circumstances, right? Let's say it's a corporate entity who wants to acquire perhaps, some other corporation. So you ask them about the entire circumstances first. Then you think about what are the relevant laws that I'm going to kind of explore in this context. Then you apply those laws to the fact situations. and then you come to a conclusion, right? So issue, rule. Rule is basically looking at the legal situation and circumstances, applying those rules, and coming to a conclusion, right? So that's what the analytical method is. But there are, of course, different dimensions to it. But this is something that we teach you in a law school, how to approach an issue in an analytical manner, going into the nuances, going into the details, and then trying to understand different dimensions of it. So that's the analytical side of things. Attention to detail is also useful when you're drafting. Let's say a client comes to you and you have to draft a contract for purchase. Now, as you are drafting, again, your attention to details matter. Perhaps you heard about the cases where a single comma or a misplaced full stop changes the interpretation of entire section, right? There are so many interesting cases, and will be exploring these cases where one word, one comma, one colon, one full stop actually changes the interpretation of the entire law. So how do you actually write it as you are drafting the contract? How do you pay attention to the detail? Even as you read a contract, are you able to perhaps identify something that none of the opposing party or your peers have identified? That's what matters. Attention to detail, right? Going into the nuances of the document in front of you, giving close reading to it, and then to be able to kind of discuss those issues. So that's analytical thinking. Now, after zooming in, you also have to zoom out. Now, what do I mean by that? You can't miss the forest for trees. So you also have to look at the entire circumstance, right? Because let's say there is a case involving contract law. Now, it's not only the legislation or Indian Contract Act that plays a role. There are multiple nuances to it. Perhaps you'll find that some other legislation is coming in. Maybe Foreign Exchange Management Act is coming in. Perhaps IPR aspect is coming in, right? Perhaps there's copyright law, trademark aspect is coming in, and you cannot really separate or compartmentalize each of these issues. You have to synthesize. You have to look at the entire issue in its holistic manner and then kind of give creative solutions. So your ability to give those creative and constructive solutions to a client will depend on your wider understanding of the issue. And that connects to our first point, being curious, being open-minded, having a wide knowledge of different things. That actually comes in very handy when you're giving an advice to a client, right? So when a client comes to you, let's say you're working at a law firm again and you are working at a senior level, when a prospective client comes to you, they're not only looking for a legal advice, right? That's a mistake to assume that they're only looking at the legal aspect of it. But they also expect you to understand the business side of it. They also expect you to understand, let's say, the economic side of it, the political side of it, right? So you have to really be aware of all of these nuances, let's say, that come into the entire business dimensions, right? So when an entity is trying to, perform or do certain activity, what are the economic implications of it, business implications of it, financial, political implications of it, cultural implications of it? And they expect you to really understand the entire nuances, right? And that's why being aware of the developments around the country, having an open mind and having an understanding of different circumstances becomes very useful. And that's what I mean by the ability to be able to zoom out. Now, what can you do, right? Now, more practically, pragmatically, if you're thinking about cultivating the skills, what can you do in terms of cultivating both analytical and critical thinking? For analytical thinking, the first thing that you can start doing right now is reading, right? And reading something very, very carefully. Now, it's again connected to the first point. If you're reading a newspaper article, go into the nuances, read the article very, very carefully. Perhaps you can annotate the article, make notes of what laws are being quoted, what sections are being quoted, right? Perhaps read a different interpretation of the same issue. Let's say there is a development around uniform civil code. Perhaps you've heard about uniform civil code discussion happening around the country. And perhaps you can read multiple perspectives on it, right? From an Indian perspective, perhaps you can read perspectives from other jurisdictions. Perhaps you can read counter arguments to it. And that will help you read into that issue very, very closely. And how to develop critical thinking is reading as many different things as possible. I remember an anecdote um, that a British House of Lord judge always used to share. The anecdote goes like this: there was a journalist who asked, in the UK, they did not have the Supreme Court. It only started, I think, around 10, 15 years back. Before that, their highest court was called House of Lords, right? And the judges were called as lords. So one of the lords who was, let's say, master of the rolls, the chief of those higher appellate bodies, he was asked, what are some qualities that you expect in an excellent lawyer and an excellent judge? And he started giving out lists. He said to journalists, they must be very proficient with Latin language, perhaps even classical Greek. They must have read literature widely. They must read Shakespeare and important English authors. They must read about politics. They must read about philosophy. They must read about, different economic dimensions. And the journalist got confused. He said, but my lord, what about law? And the law lord said, yeah, that too can help sometimes, right? And what he was highlighting here is this ability to think widely, think critically about things. So, how to develop analytical thinking is by reading everything very carefully and closely, making mental notes of it, actual notes of it. And how to develop critical thinking is by trying to read as many different things as possible, right? And you'll be surprised uh, that you'll be able to form these interconnections when you're reading about IPR, and the next day you are reading about you know some sort of open software, and you realize the interconnections between the two, and that's an amazing skill that a lawyer can possess. All right, now let's move on to the third skill, which is research skill. Now, what do I mean by that? Now, in a legal profession or in your law school career, it's not only important to kind of know the law, because your peers will also know the law, right? Anyone who has paid decent attention to the law will be able to know the broader aspects of it. Where you can distinguish yourself is again the depth into which you go, right? Or different dimensions of it that you uncover. And there, your research skills would really, really matter. So when an issue comes before you, let's say you're doing a moot court, right? And in a moot court, there is an issue about, let's say, different idea of tort law. Now, maybe your colleagues know about one particular judgment that's given in 2018, but through your research, right? And I'll explain in a minute what do I mean by that. If you're able to find a case from, let's say, March 2024, all right, just from last month, maybe 10 days back, and that case has overruled the last case, then the judge is immediately impressed by your thoroughness, right? By your proficiency in your research. And that really works very well in your favor. So research becomes very, very critical to again establish yourself, establish your sincerity, your rigor in the law school as well as in a legal profession. Now, how do you excel in researching? Again, we will teach you these skills at BITS Law. You have specific courses such as legal method, and also in different courses through different assignments or through different co-curricular activities, you will be engaging in research. So you'll do your moot courts, you'll be doing your different assignments, you'll be doing different in-class activity, and research is an integral part of your 5-year journey, really. It's really one of the core skills that you can develop at a law school. But primarily, nowadays, research has become mostly online, right? So there are these different interesting websites and softwares out there that help you become very, very quick and proficient at finding the exact law or perhaps exact court case that you are looking for, right? So there are websites such as Manupatra, for instance, or SCC online, there, you have to really master yourself the art of researching well. How do you type in a particular query? There are these different benefits that's, or advantages that these websites have. You can look into, has the case been overruled or not? What are some associated cases with this? What are the cases where this particular case law that you're looking for is mentioned? And through these kind of knacks, you can refine your research skills, and you can present your argument better than perhaps what your competitors or peers are articulating. We also have an excellent library and very competent librarians, and they will help you, right? We have this amazing online bundle of resources, really, that offer you resources not only from in India, but also from across the world, be it scholarly resources, legal resources, online books. It's really a variety of resources that are being offered. And if you become proficient at researching well, right? Sometimes, of course, it entails going into the library, picking out those books, going into those specific pages, finding out something that really stands apart. Uh, but that ability, if you cultivate well, I think that's one of the most excellent and a skill that can help you stand apart. This ability to really kind of drudge through, sustain through all the drudgery. Being in the library when all your peers have gone home, but being able to kind of find that one case law that really makes your case stronger. I think that's something that really, really helps you succeed both at a law school as well as in your legal profession. Right. So far we have covered three skills: curiosity and general or commercial awareness, analytical and critical thinking, and finally, third is research. Now let's move on to the remaining three skills. I'll cover them quickly so that we also have time for questions and answers at the end. But the fourth skill, and perhaps it's perhaps the most vital skill at a law school, and that's communication skill. And in communication, again, there are two prongs: your verbal communication and your written communication, right? Now, the first image that comes to a prospective law student's mind, or perhaps any parent, or perhaps those who are thinking about law as a career, is these lawyers. Perhaps you watched Suits, perhaps you watched Dharmendra or Sunny Deol, I think, articulating before my lord, saying Tariq pe Tariq, Tariq pe Tariq. But that's not the only articulation. It's important, but what happens in a courtroom is vastly different from what is portrayed typically in your cinema or in your TV shows. They're great for fun, but you'll realize that once you actually start interning, once you start actually entering the profession, you'll realize that the reality of law is very different. And there, the communication is not as flamboyant or as dramatic as is often portrayed. It's very calm, it's very subtle, it's very confident, it's very assuring, yet it's not arrogant, right? And the communication is not only limited to your courtroom arguments. That's again another mistake that many law students or those who are interested in law assume. Most of your communication, rather, is with your clients, is in meetings with your prospective clients, is in different sort of counseling that you do, it's in negotiations that you do, right? In perhaps in briefing the senior counsel that you do. And that's also equally important, how well you are able to connect to your client, right? And it involves small talk also. When a client walks in, you can't simply kind of get into the case. You perhaps talk about how hot this summer is going to be. So your proficiency in terms of interpersonal skills, right? Having even small talk, but also to be able to argue before the Supreme Court, perhaps, if that chance comes, and I'm sure it'll come for many of you. But having that wide range of competency in communication, to be able to give a lecture before law students, to be able to perform or present your argument before a high court or the Supreme Court, talking to a client perhaps who does not have enough financial mean to file a case at the high court, you need to be very competent and proficient in connecting to, clearly and persuasively putting your point across to all of these different stakeholders, be it a judge, be it a client, be it other lawyer, whatever your perspective is, you should be able to clearly and in a very persuasive manner be able to present your point in these different settings. And that's verbal communication. Now you have ample opportunities in a law school to cultivate this career, these skills, right? Moot court, of course, comes to everyone's mind, but moot court is only a part of it, right? Let's not inflate moot court into more than what it actually is. It's fun, it's important. You should definitely do one or two good moots in your law school career, but also, maybe as simple a thing as presentations, maybe talking to your peers at a hostel, maybe talking to your family members, maybe talking to faculty members. That's also something that will eventually play a role in cultivating your overall communication skills, right? Now, the second aspect of it is written communication. And again, I can't overemphasize this point because it's so fundamental to a legal profession or your law school life. And that's something I've been noticing many students are struggling with. And it's something that one can actually start working on before you join a law school. Because writing well is just so important in a law school and in your legal career. What do you think the communication, most of your communication is going to be through written media. Oral arguments, even in courts, are only peripheral aspect of it, only to explain, substantiate, interpret a particular point, maybe that is not very clear. Most of the communication, be it with clients, be it with, court submissions, be it with different documents regarding corporate commercial aspects of it, most of it is going to be a written kind of set of documents. And so you need to also cultivate the skill to write well, right? And if you're struggling at it, if you think that that's something that you can work on, I would suggest please start working on it right now. Now, again, what can you do in that regard? Maybe practicing 500 words every day. Think about a particular topic, write 500 words every day. Nowadays, you have this interesting, generative AI technologies. So you can put your writing there, you can ask it for feedback on your writing. So you can use these tools very creatively. But practicing writing every day, maybe it's just 200 words, right? Maybe it's a Facebook comment that you're writing, but paying attention to what you're writing well. Maybe you can pick up different topic. Let's say, new issue comes up at the Supreme Court, or let's say new discussion is happening around a particular law. You can think about writing something after reading a few articles around it. But if you manage to write well, if you kind of cultivate this skill, I think it's going to be really, really helpful in your overall career. It's something that I think really makes you stand apart in this kind of crowd of legal professions. So, articulating well, both verbally as well as in a written way, I think is one of the core skills, and you can actually start working on it from today. In terms of verbal communication, of course, there are these cliche skills or cliche practice suggestions, and I think they're cliche because they work really. Is really trying to kind of standing in front of the mirror, maybe practicing your presentation. As simple a thing as that can really help cultivate your confidence, your overall articulation, if you really pay attention to that. But you have to put in some work for you to be able to kind of refine and cultivate these skills in yourselves. So that was the fourth skill, communication. Now, the fifth skill is kind of related to the fourth one, but oftentimes it's ignored, right? It's something that we don't value, we don't think it is important, and that's interpersonal skills. In fact, and this is something that many professionals will tell you, your law school or your experience in a law school, your academic aspect of it, perhaps can amount to 30 to 40% of your overall career trajectory. What matters after a certain point is how well you are able to collaborate, how well you are able to interact in your career or even at a law school. You'll be talking to your friends. You'll be talking to, as I said, you're, at law school at BITS Law. We also have teaching and research fellows. They help you kind of, navigate through different dimensions of law school. So talking to them, talking to faculty members, talking to prospective clients, talking to prospective um, or maybe your colleagues or even judges. How do you communicate? How do you develop that kind of network? That becomes also very, very important, especially after a certain point at a law firm. They expect you to generate clients, right? You must have seen if you watch Suits. Um, and I think it's because all of us have, mostly I think those law students who are interested, they watched it. That's why I'm giving this example. Please never consider Suits as um, an ideal depiction of what really happens in a firm. But but you must have noticed that after a point of time, it's really about their communication, their ability to bring in new clients. And that ability is going to depend on you being able to connect to a client, right? You being able to kind of talk to them about their child's kindergarten experience, right? Or maybe their recent vacation to Hawaii or Bali, and to be able to kind of connect to them. And so you need to kind of develop those interpersonal skills, right? If you're shy, if you're not very comfortable presenting yourself in a meeting, that's not going to work for you very well in the longer run. You have to get yourself out of your comfort zone. If you're not very comfortable, I think even in your family meetings, if a guest comes in, a distant relative comes in, putting yourself out there, trying to talk to them, or maybe you're in a cab trying to talk to a cab driver. As simple a thing as that. But that eventually, through trial and error, maybe it will not go very well at first, but eventually you'll kind of learn how to get better at this art, how to kind of talk to someone who is perhaps doing their work in physics, and you should be able to hold some conversation with them. Maybe someone is a politician, maybe someone is a janitor, but your ability to connect to all of them through some sort of communication is going to be very, very important, right? So don't ignore interpersonal skills. Your ability to put yourself out there, going outside your comfort zone, and to connect and network with people is going to be perhaps more important than your knowledge of law, right? And that's something that one has to keep in mind. And with this, I'll come to the final skill now, and which is, it's kind of a mix of couple of skills, but I would broadly put it under the category of self-discipline, organization, or time management. And that's something that you will learn. If you join a law school, there is no other way than to learn these skills of managing multiple things simultaneously. Our students, for instance, the first year students, now this is not to intimidate, but just to give you an idea of how proficient you eventually get, is they finish their intramoot, then they have their mid semester, then they're doing their cultural festivals. And I think there's a sports day also that's coming around. And you need to really kind of manage all of it if you really want to kind of you know succeed in a law school or in your profession. There will always be multiple assignments with kind of multiple deadlines. There will be multiple projects that you're handling. You'll really have to kind of work in a team. Perhaps in some days you have to be very comfortable in working with members that you may not agree with even. But that ability, that kind of organization skill, time management skill, and your overall kind of self initiative, that resilience that you have to develop, right? That ability to work under pressure, to deliver on time, deliver kind of quality work on time, that becomes very important. And I think there's this is something that you'll eventually acquire in a law school. I think no law school student who is graduated successfully has ever failed to perhaps acquire these skills, because law school is a journey that will inevitably kind of prepare you for things like this. So we have, for instance, different group projects where you have to work with different people, and you have to kind of deliver your work at a particular time, and that really prepares for your legal career, right? When you join a firm, when you join a boutique or different chamber, you really have to work with people, deliver your work in a particular time, and your entire law school experience will prepare you for that self discipline, self initiative, time management, organization, collaboration, all of these work ethics perhaps. That's something that's going to be very central, and you will eventually pick up these skills um, in your entire law school journey. Um, So I think that's about it broadly. These are the 6 skills that I wanted to talk about. Let me kind of, again, recap these skills. The first is curiosity and awareness. And what I mean by awareness is general awareness and commercial awareness. Ability to zoom in and zoom out, or putting another way, ability to think analytically and critically. That's the second skill. Third is your research skill. Fourth is your communication. And again, both verbal communication and written communication. And I've suggested multiple things that you can start doing from tomorrow, from today itself, rather, that, before you come to the law school itself, you'll be kind of, start getting good at it. You can try cultivating and refining those skills. Fifth is interpersonal skills. Um, Sixth was time management, organization, and self initiative or discipline. If you keep this in mind, if you keep these important skills in mind, I think there's nothing that can stop you from, becoming one of the great lawyers, or, great judges, or whatever really that you want to be. So I often put to my students this way: think well, research well, articulate well, and collaborate well. If you have these skills, right? Thinking well, researching well, articulating well, and collaborating well. If you do those things, I think that's a sure shot kind of formula for success, not just in a law school, really, but in your overall professional career, even across different areas. Many law students eventually end up going to pursue different careers. Some go to pursue their MBAs, some go to pursue public policy degrees. But if you have these skills, and law schools will really help you cultivate these skills: think well, research well, write well, or let's say articulate well, and collaborate well. If you do that, I think, you can really kind of have a very, very successful career ahead. So I think that's all I wanted to say for this session. Maybe if there are more questions, I'll be able to elaborate on these different dynamics, or maybe talk about a new skill that you guys are interested in. So please feel free to put your questions in the message box. I guess, Kevin, does that work? Runalini, are you there?
Chinmay, yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we have a few questions. There's a question from Sanika. She's
Yeah.
asking like, is proficiency in state language equally important as English is? She's
Is
saying like,
proficiency in vernacular languages, I'm assuming, right?
yeah, that's right.
Well,
Because
I
she
mean,
says
that's a
that
very
I'm a
good question, actually.
Maharashtrian studying in Gujarat. So would my internships in Gujarat lower courts be hampered due to low regional linguistic proficiency?
That's one question, right?
Yeah, that's one question.
Right. Well, that's a very good question, actually. That's a very perceptive question, I must say, because to a certain extent, I would say yes, it does matter. For instance, if you're going to a Mumbai, any of the Mumbai, especially if you're interested in pursuing a litigation career, I think it would make sense to be proficient in the vernacular language. So, when I was talking about those interpersonal skills, I forgot to mention one of the very key stakeholders if you're interested in a litigation career, and that's going to be different clerks, right, or different kind of people who manage these courts. And that's why you'll see, even in a Mumbai firm, be it, maybe tier one law firm, if you are able to read Marathi, write Marathi, speak Marathi, I think that's going to be an advantage there. Having said that, though, I think it's not a major disadvantage, right? Eventually you kind of pick up some of the basic things that you require. It's not impossible, as long as you have basic proficiency to have some basic conversation with a clerk, to be able to understand a notification that's in perhaps Gujarati or Marathi. If you plan to litigate in Gujarat, having some basic knowledge of Gujarati to be able to read. But of course, you work in a team, right? So typically you'll find that one of your colleagues will be able to understand the vernacular language, and you can get by. It's not impossible. And that's about litigation. Now, if you're in a law firm, if you're in a corporate career, perhaps the degree of this disability of not knowing the vernacular, it won't even affect that much, because at the end of the day, it's very rarely that you'll have the opportunity or even reason to go to a court. There will be notifications, there will be especially local rules that will come in native vernacular languages, but you can definitely get it interpreted and translated through a colleague, and you can get by. So in Mumbai, people from all over India come and work, right, at different firms, at different corporate houses, and it's never been a major impediment. I mean, none of these corporations or firms ever mention knowledge of vernacular law as a an inevitable, let's say, as a necessary criteria. It's an advantage, but it's not a kind of necessity per se, right? But if you know for certain that you're interested in litigation and you know where you want to litigate, building some profit inevitable. If you go to and if you is going to make a difference, right? Of course, it's going to kind of give you some sort of advantage. If you're in Maharashtra, knowing Marathi is going to kind of help you a bit. If you're in Gujarat, knowing Gujarati is going to help you a bit, especially at kind of lower courts.
Thank you, Chinmay, for answering the question. There's one more question. Like, they want to know if
Yeah.
you could repeat the website or podcast that you referred, where they can listen or
Yes.
refer to.
Yes. Okay. Right. Great. Great. So I had mentioned a couple of things that they can do in terms of curiosity and general awareness. One of the brilliant websites that's very, very professional is called Live Law. LIVELAW. You can simply Google it and you'll find, maybe it's the first hit. Now, what this website does is it has different components. It kind of analyzes legal developments every day. They have commentaries on different legal issues, and not only covering the Supreme Court, but different high courts, lower courts, talking about the political dimensions, economic dimensions. So it's really a very comprehensive website. There's another website called Bar and Bench. I think that's also very professional, very helpful. In terms of podcasts, you can listen to the podcast by The Economist, right? It's a great magazine. It's been around for more than 100 years, and they have an excellent podcast that will help you understand various developments around the world. It helps you widen your perspective. There is one by Indian Express called Three Things, and they will cover three important things. Of course, it's in the title itself. They typically cover three important things that have happened from the last week or last day, and they'll often discuss different legislations, different developments. So just yesterday, for instance, Delhi High Court gave a verdict, or at least the prima facie order, regarding Mr. Kejriwal's arrest. And you'll find that this has been analyzed in today's podcast, and that really kind of helps you stay in that kind of groove, stay in the loop, and build your understanding of the issue. So three things: The Economist, Live Law, Bar and Bench. I think these are some excellent resources that you can explore. There's also Law Octopus, but that's meant for different opportunities in a law school, right? It's not a. There's another great website I would suggest. It's called SCC Observer, Supreme Court Observer. SCO, sorry, Supreme Court Observer. And that's also a brilliant website. It looks at the Supreme Court and has a very professional and very interesting kind of delineation of different judgments and different dimensions of it. So these are some helpful websites and podcasts.
Thank you, Chinmay.
Yeah.
We have a question from Deep. Deep, in one of our session earlier with Professor Chinmay, we've covered like what kind of books you should refer.
Yes.
So Deep has a question, like, could you suggest some philosophy and political books you would recommend for a law student?
Books. Okay. Now, there are a couple of books, but I think some of these books are very expensive. These are by Oxford publication or Cambridge publication. We have it in our library. Perhaps if you get an online access, There's one called Legal Skills, simply. I forgot the authors, uh, but it's simply titled Legal Skills, and it's by Oxford Publication. There's another brief book that's not very expensive and that everyone can buy. It's by Glanville Williams, and it's called Learning the Law, right? That's also very, very good. It gives you an idea of how to prepare for a law school, what are some things that you can be aware of. There's another one. There are many that I'd suggested last time around, really, but specifically for law, I would suggest, Mr. Nariman has written a couple of interesting books about the legal system, about the Supreme Court. There are interesting titles that he has. God Save Our Supreme Court, and then his autobiography is called Before Memory Fades. These are some excellent, excellent resources that you must read. You must read these books if you really, really want to kind of get an understanding of how great this field has been, and you'll get to know so many different interesting personalities and profiles. So you can start with this Legal Skills, Learning the Law, Mr. Nariman's book, and perhaps when you come to the law school, I think you can explore the library. There is a section called as legal research and about the law, and we have so many books there that you can read and explore.
Okay, thank you, Chinmay. We'll
Yeah.
take one last question. The question is from Jia. So she's saying that with the development of technology and online mediums being used to question a witness, how can we master our virtual communications?
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
you'll be a better person to answer. She's
So
referring
that's
to.
a very interesting question. In fact, that's what I was discussing earlier when I said law being dynamic. And you'll see that even at the Supreme Court, you'll find that some of the lawyers argue like this, the way I'm giving lecture, because Supreme Court has also become very dynamic in terms of technology. Most of our meetings are done online. Everyone is moving to work from home model. Anyway, our cities are becoming so unsustainable. If you're in Bangalore, for instance, you'll know that even law firms are moving to a different model of work from home. So sometimes even moot courts happen online, especially during the pandemic. I think many moot courts happened online, and their students came up with different ways to kind of make it a bit more proficient. I think it's just one of those skills that you eventually have to adapt to, get better at. I think staying on the top of your game, being comfortable, being outside, going outside your comfort zone, as I said, and being comfortable communicating online, having meetings online. It will happen necessarily. Also, you'll have so many interactions that will happen over Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So it's something that you can develop through that. uh, and looking at the fact, as she rightly identified, is going to be kind of an important element. I think I can only suggest practicing it more and being better at it, and hopefully our fast internet connections will help in all of this. But there are very interesting. Recently, a judge came to she was the Chief Justice of Delhi High Court for a while, and then no, Chief Justice of Jammu and Kashmir High Court for a while, and she shared her experiences of in camera courts and how technology has been helping in terms of giving evidence and stuff like that. I was fascinated by it, and I think our courts are also moving in that very interesting direction. So I think eventually all of us will have to adapt to it.
Yes, thank you, Chinmay. So I
So
think
Kevin, I see a couple of questions here. I think I'll just give one word answer to this.
okay.
So could you please, sites I've mentioned, BA, BBA, LLB, doesn't really matter. My quick response is, as long as you know what you want to pursue after your law school and you'll figure it out in a 5-year journey, I think really in terms of your career trajectory, both really won't make a lot of difference. I think about your interests and then take a call yourself, but it doesn't make any difference in terms of your overall career trajectory. So BBA, just feel free based on your own inclinations. Uh, Law Lord said proficient in Latin and Greek. So I think it's an important part. That's a great question, Akash. So we do have Latin maxims. We do have some important kind of Greek works that we will explore, but having some understanding of it is more than enough. We don't need to now really go into the nuances. I think Latin maxims are still part of Indian legal culture, so we will inevitably study them. Yeah, especially you'll find in different legal methods, even in administrative law, you have so many Latin maxims that still play an important part. So that was my quick response.
Yes. So I think we've covered most of the questions, Chinmay.
Okay. Okay.
Even I'd like to mention that we also have a video on YouTube regarding BA LLB and BB LLB. If you have any
Right.
confusion, you can also check that video.
Right.
Okay.
You all of you can check out the YouTube page of BITS Law School. And there I think we've put so many interesting experiences from current law students. I think you can, also listen to their experiences, see the new campus perhaps, and, other resources. So go check out the YouTube page. I think it's very helpful.
Yeah. So thank you, Chinmay. Thank you, Chinmay, for joining us today. I mean, it has definitely helped most of them and has given a lot of clarity in terms of what kind of skills expected
Yeah.
at the law school. Thank you
Yeah.
once again for joining. Thank you, guys.
No
Thank you,
problem.
everyone.
No problem at all. I thoroughly enjoyed this. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and looking forward to meet all of you in a law school, and hopefully in my courses as well. Thank you so much, everyone.